Gate agent subjects black woman to extra screening, then discovers she's a civil rights attorney. A sea of tired travelers inched through the morning chaos at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, each hoping to reach the security checkpoint in time to catch their flights. Among them was Serena Carter, a poised, soft-spoken black woman whose eyes revealed a fierce determination beneath her outward calm. As she approached the TSA line, Officer Randall locked his gaze on her. The moment their eyes met, Serena felt something shift in the air. That small but potent unease ballooned when Randall steered her into an additional screening area. Little did he know, the woman he was about to single out was a well-known civil rights attorney. The sun's early rays spilled across Atlanta's roads, painting an orange glow on sleek city buildings. Hartsfield-Jackson buzzed with life. Overnight layover passengers, bleary-eyed from sporadic naps on uncomfortable seats, and early morning travelers determined to outrun the dawn. The lines at security twisted and turned like a restless serpent, spitting out clusters of anxious flyers. Suitcases rolled across glossy tiles, their owners gently cursing the day they chose to fly during prime morning hours. Serena Carter wove through the throngs of people, her footsteps purposeful. The overhead announcements droned about gate changes and final boarding calls, but she barely heard them. She had just finished a whirlwind legal conference in Atlanta, where she had spoken on a panel about systemic discrimination in law enforcement. Her flight home to Washington, D.C. was scheduled for 10:15 a.m., and she still had time to grab a coffee if she could hustle through security. Dressed in a simple charcoal grey pantsuit, Serena carried a functional black tote slung over her shoulder. Despite her unassuming manner, there was something about her, the way she held her posture, the intensity of her gaze. She radiated a confidence that came from years of battles in courtrooms, forging alliances with grassroots activists, and pushing forward progressive changes one case at a time. As she approached the ID checkpoint, she spotted two uniformed TSA officers. One was a young woman scanning boarding passes, appearing bored and exhausted from her shift. The other was Officer Randall, a sturdy man with close-cropped hair and a mustache so precisely trimmed it looked painted on. Randall projected an authority that screamed zero tolerance. His eyes zipped from passenger to passenger, flickering with sternness or disapproval as he sized them up. Serena handed her ID and boarding pass to the young woman officer, who scanned them swiftly. Just as the woman was about to wave Serena through, Officer Randall inserted himself. "Hold on," he said in a voice that was neither loud nor soft. It was an unsettling tone, clipped and direct. "Ma'am, would you step aside for a moment?" Serena felt a jolt in her gut. She'd flown countless times and knew the small humiliations travelers often experienced. She also knew full well that sometimes these moments felt targeted. Nonetheless, she prided herself on courtesy and compliance where it was reasonable. With a calm expression, she obliged. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. Randall's eyes bored into her. He offered no immediate explanation, merely gestured to the roped-off path that led to the secondary screening area. As she followed his directive, she couldn't help noticing the young woman officer throw her an apologetic glance. Maybe it was pity, or just regret that she hadn't scanned Serena's documents faster to avoid Randall's interception. In her career as a civil rights attorney, Serena had seen and endured various forms of prejudice, from subtle microaggressions to blatant attempts at intimidation. She couldn't help but wonder if this was one more instance. But she reminded herself to stay measured. Reacting too harshly could escalate things unnecessarily. And if there was one thing she had learned, it was that knowledge of the law could be her most potent weapon. The line for secondary screening was relatively short, 2 men ahead of her, both looking exasperated. As she waited, she scrolled through her phone, trying to distract herself from the prickling unease in her spine. Her case docket pinged with new emails, each one a puzzle piece in the tapestry of legal battles she was juggling. She read one from an ACLU contact about an upcoming lawsuit regarding excessive force by police. That was her world, turning injustices into winnable cases. It was something that gave her purpose. When it was her turn, a female TSA agent wearing latex gloves gestured for Serena to place her belongings in a bin for inspection. Serena calmly did so. She emptied her pockets, only a pen, some coins, and a small note she'd scribbled for a phone call reminder. She removed her shoes, placing them neatly in the bin alongside her laptop. Another agent, a bearded man in his late 20s, glanced down at her items. His eyes flicked from the pen to her laptop, as if he were expecting something more sinister. She sighed inwardly. Then, to her dismay, Officer Randall reappeared. He stepped right behind the bearded agent, as though overseeing every move. The younger agent seemed slightly tense under Randall's scrutiny. "All clear here?" the bearded agent asked, trying to sound casual. Randall didn't respond to him. Instead, his gaze locked onto Serena. "Ma'am," Randall began, "I'm going to need to pat you down. It's part of the random screening process. Please step over here." Serena breathed in, counted to 2, and reminded herself to keep calm. She had a plane to catch, and escalating things with a power-tripping officer could spell delays. She'd handle it professionally like she always did. "Of course," she answered. As Randall methodically began the pat-down, using the back of his hands across her shoulders, down her arms and along her waist, Serena studied him. She noticed the slight trembling of his left hand. Was it adrenaline, fear, or something else? She felt the mounting tension coil around them. But for now, she remained silent, respecting the process even if it felt more invasive than warranted. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this was anything but random. She had lived too long, witnessed too many disparities, to ignore the possibility. Yet, she would give him the benefit of the doubt until he removed any doubt she had. Officer Randall finished the pat-down and motioned to the bearded agent to swipe Serena's hands for explosives, residue, a test that usually was only done if there had been a red flag on the initial scanning or if the traveler had set off some trigger. The bearded agent, uncertain, hesitated but complied. Serena stood, arms out, trying to maintain her composure. She could sense eyes from the main security line drifting toward her. A few travelers offered sympathetic half-smiles, others simply stared. She had represented clients in lawsuits alleging discriminatory practices by law enforcement. She had read the data. Black women were often subjected to additional scrutiny for vague or unfounded reasons, sometimes called officer discretion, which proved all too malleable. The bearded agent finished swiping her hands and placed the swab into the machine. A low hum sounded as the screen displayed the results. It blinked green, indicating no trace of explosives. Serena let out a soft sigh of relief. She had nothing to hide, but being singled out always set her nerves on edge. Randall loomed behind the machine, his fingers drumming on the counter. His expression told Serena he wasn't satisfied that nothing incriminating had shown up. "You heading somewhere important?" he asked abruptly, a feigned lightness to his voice that rang hollow. Serena raised an eyebrow. "Yes, my flight board's soon to Washington, D.C., he nodded, the corners of his mouth flickering in some unreadable emotion. "Take your time. We have more steps to go through here." That statement bristled. More steps, Serena thought. She'd just undergone the pat-down and the hand swab. Standard procedure. The only next step, typically, would be rummaging through her personal belongings if they'd seen something suspicious on the X-ray. But her purse and laptop bag had already cleared the scanner without any alarm. Serena observed the bearded agent shift uncomfortably. He opened her tote and rummaged inside with latex-gloved hands. He pulled out a paperback biography of Thurgood Marshall, flipping through the pages as if it might hide a razor blade or contraband. Next came a file folder containing legal briefs from her recent conference. The agent's eyes scanned the top page, seeing words like racial discrimination, unconstitutional, class action lawsuit. She watched a flicker of awareness cross his face. "Are you a lawyer?" he asked, more curious than confrontational. Serena nodded once. "Yes." "Criminal law?" "Civil rights law," she responded softly, letting the weight of it sit. Her words hung in the air. She might as well have been wearing a flashing neon sign that read, "I know my rights." She could practically feel Officer Randall's posture tighten. After finding nothing suspicious, the bearded agent stepped back. "All clear here," he repeated, sounding more confident this time. Yet Randall wasn't ready to let her go. With forced politeness, he signaled for her to step closer to him once more. "I'll be conducting an additional pat-down," he said, almost as if he were reading from a script. Serena blinked. "I've already been patted down," I complied. He shrugged. "New protocol. Random selection." She could see the bearded agent cast a confused glance. He seemed about to speak up but caught himself. Serena took a moment, inhaled slowly, and met Randall's eyes. There was no anger in her voice, but there was firmness. "Officer Randall, I have no issue following the law or TSA guidelines. But you've already pat me down. You've already swabbed me and found nothing. If there is a legitimate reason for a second pat down, I'd like to hear it." His moustache twitched in mild annoyance. "Ma'am, TSA regulations allow me to do additional screenings if I deem them necessary. I don't owe you an explanation beyond that." She recognized the tactic. She'd seen it employed before. Officers sometimes used their broad, discretionary power to target individuals they found suspicious or just disliked. Or perhaps they recognized someone from a social cause or media coverage. The reasons, if discriminatory, seldom found their way into official reports. But that didn't mean they weren't real. Still, she had a plane to catch, and time was ticking. She glanced at the overhead clock, 8:49 a.m. She had a little over an hour to spare. Normally, she would fight back, demand a supervisor, request transparency. But she also knew she was treading on delicate ground in a busy airport. A complaint might be filed, but that wouldn't help her catch her flight. She raised her hands in submission. "If it's that important, proceed." Her voice was calm, but inside she was fuming. Randall conducted the second pat down, this time more invasive than the first. His hands pressed over her torso, and she felt his gloved fingers graze her bra strap. She inhaled sharply, but stayed silent. She heard the faint clucks of disapproval from a couple onlookers, but no one intervened. When he finished, he gave a stiff nod. "Okay, you're free to go," he said, as if he'd done her a favor. Serena gathered her belongings with painstaking composure. She slipped on her shoes, reorganized her tote, and clutched the Thurgood Marshall biography under one arm. She could feel Randall's gaze scorching into her back as she walked away, but she refused to look back. Her heart hammered, but her spine remained straight. Once clear of the screening area, she stopped by a small seating section to re-center herself. She rubbed her arms, trying to shake off the invasive feeling. She thought about the conference, about how the country's best civil rights attorneys had discussed how to tackle hidden biases in law enforcement. And here she was, living that exact scenario, trapped in a microcosm of targeted suspicion. She felt both angered and strangely validated that the cause she fought for every day was undeniably real. But what Officer Randall couldn't possibly know was that in singling her out, he'd inadvertently set off a chain of events. Because Serena Carter was not a woman to simply file the incident away as unfortunate. She was a fighter. She was about to become his worst nightmare, and she didn't even have to break a sweat. Serena reached the concourse, where bustling stores, coffee shops, and charging stations lined the walkway. The intercom announcements blended with the chatter of travelers, but she couldn't shake off the encounter at security. She decided coffee would help settle her nerves. At a Starbucks kiosk, she ordered a simple latte. As she waited for her drink, she mentally replayed the pat-downs. She recalled every detail: Randall's tone, the reluctant expression of the bearded agent, the suspicious second pat-down. She bit her lip, considering whether to bring it up with a supervisor right then and there. But she glanced at her watch, 8:57 a.m. She had just over an hour, though she wanted to be at her gate by 9:30 at the latest. "Latte for Serena," called the barista. She took the cup, murmured a polite thank you, and found a small table where she could sit, sip, and think. Part of her was furious. The other part reminded her of the bigger fight cases that were far more pressing. This was humiliating, yes. But was it worth possibly missing her flight to lodge a complaint that might go nowhere? Suddenly her phone buzzed. It was a call from Kendra, one of her closest friends and a fellow attorney at the ACLU. She picked up, trying to mask the tension in her voice. "Hey, Kendra. Hey, girl, how's Atlanta? Headed home soon?" Kendra's voice was a welcome comfort. "Yeah, flight's in about an hour," Serena said, her tone controlled. "Listen, something happened at security." She proceeded to describe the incident. She didn't go into excessive detail, just the basics. "That's messed up," Kendra fumed. "You know you don't have to let that slide. You can talk to a supervisor, file a complaint, maybe even put a spotlight on the pattern here." Serena exhaled. "I know, but if I do it now, I risk missing my flight. If I do it after, it loses the immediacy." "True, but just remember, your voice matters. If you don't speak out, who will?" Kendra's encouragement echoed Serena's own convictions. "I hear you," Serena replied. "Let me think it through." They chatted briefly about the upcoming Supreme Court case Serena was preparing for, involving workplace discrimination. That was Serena's top priority, ensuring her legal briefs were flawless, that each argument soared with clarity. She had a mountain of paperwork waiting on her desk in D.C., not to mention a law school speaking engagement in a week. Before hanging up, Kendra said, "Don't let this slide too easily, okay? The next traveler might not have your legal savvy and could be even more vulnerable." Serena nodded, though Kendra couldn't see her. "I'll handle it, one way or another." After ending the call, Serena stared at the phone in her hand. Kendra was right. The thought nagged her. If someone else, less equipped, had faced Randall's scrutiny, would they have known how to respond or how to hold him accountable? She finished her coffee, stood, and decided she needed more time to mull over her next move. The flight wasn't until 10:15 a.m. She walked down the concourse, stopping at a bookstore display featuring bestsellers. She ran her fingers over the spines, absent-mindedly, her thoughts whirling. Memories of her law school days at Howard University flitted through her mind. Back then, she dreamt of changing the world, one case at a time, protecting the marginalized and giving voice to the voiceless. This was precisely the sort of thing she felt compelled to challenge. Flight 1276 to Washington, D.C. now, boarding in 1 hour, crackled a loudspeaker announcement. Serena decided she had enough time to speak to a TSA supervisor, at least to lodge a formal complaint. If they gave her the runaround, she'd gather as many details as possible and follow through once she landed in D.C. She set her jaw, turned on her heels, and marched back toward the security area. Back at the security checkpoint, the lines had shortened considerably now that the morning rush was dissipating. Serena scanned for a podium or some sign of a TSA supervisor. She spotted a middle-aged woman in a navy blazer with a TSA badge pinned to her lapel, standing near the entrance to the lines, directing travelers. Serena approached politely. "Excuse me, are you the supervisor on duty?" The woman turned, a cautious smile plastered on her face. "Yes, I'm Supervisor Klein. How can I help you?" Serena took a breath. "I'd like to file a complaint regarding an interaction with one of your officers. I was subject to what seemed like an unjustified extra screening and two pat-downs actually, both by Officer Randall." Supervisor Klein's expression shifted subtly, her professional facade rippling. "I see. Could you provide me with more details?" Serena recounted the incident in a calm, methodical manner. She emphasized that there was no apparent cause for the second pat-down and that the officer's demeanor raised concerns of bias. "I'm an attorney," Serena explained, "specializing in civil rights, so I'm well aware that TSA procedures allow for discretionary screenings. However, there must be a legitimate reason for repeated searches. This seemed beyond standard protocol." Klein nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. We take such matters seriously." She pulled out a small notepad and began jotting down notes. "Please understand that we'll need to review surveillance footage, speak with the officer in question, and compare your allegations with official procedure. If wrongdoing is found, we have an internal disciplinary process. However, these things do take time." Serena's eyebrows flicked upward. "I understand. I just want to ensure there's a record, and I'd appreciate confirmation that you'll follow up." Klein reached into her blazer pocket and handed Serena a business card. "This is my direct line. I'll oversee the initial inquiry. I can't promise you the result, but I promise it won't disappear into a void." Grateful for at least some level of acknowledgement, Serena nodded and slipped the card into her tote. "Thank you, Supervisor Klein. If you need further information, please let me know. And I'll be filing an online complaint as well for documentation purposes." As Serena turned to leave, her gaze drifted across the security area. She caught a glimpse of Officer Randall standing near the body scanner, speaking to a coworker. He hadn't noticed her yet, but she could see tension in his stance, as if he sensed trouble stirring in the air. She had a feeling this was only the first step in a longer journey. Boarding had begun by the time Serena reached Gate B12. She caught her breath, relieved she wasn't late. The gate agent scanned her ticket, and she stepped onto the jet bridge. Despite being a frequent traveler, she still felt a pang of relief each time she actually made it onto a plane. The cabin was half full, with most passengers still stowing their luggage. Serena located her seat 12A, a window. She tucked her tote underneath the seat in front of her, feeling the slight adrenaline come down from the confrontation. As she settled in, she pulled out her phone to check messages. She noticed an email from an address she didn't recognize, the subject line, "We saw what happened." Curious, she opened it. The message read, "Subject, we saw what happened from, email protected, to email protected, hello Miss Carter. We witnessed the incident at the TSA checkpoint. We want you to know that if you need statements, we're willing to be witnesses. That officer's behavior was unacceptable. We got your name from overhearing your call. Our group believes in standing up for people subjected to discrimination, especially at airports. Let us know if we can help." Concerned citizen Serena's eyebrows rose. Someone had overheard her conversation with Kendra, or maybe they recognized her from her previous legal work. She scanned the short message again, feeling a mix of surprise and gratitude. She typed a quick reply. "Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate your willingness to provide statements. Please keep any details you have, and I'll be in touch if needed. Best, Serena Carter." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the plane's engines soothe her. Strangers offering support gave her a sense that maybe, just maybe, the tide was shifting, that ordinary people were more willing to speak up when they saw injustice. A stewardess came by, offering soft drinks. Serena declined, focusing instead on opening a file on her laptop titled Motion for Summary Judgment Draft. Her mind still buzzed from the TSA incident, but she had a job to do. She needed to finalize her arguments in a major case about racially biased hiring practices in a corporate environment. In many ways, it paralleled her experiences at the airport, a system that, on paper, was supposed to be neutral, but in practice could be twisted by personal bias. After typing a few paragraphs, she paused to reflect. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her paralegal, Jeff. Just confirming your arrival time. Let's aim to meet tomorrow morning at 9 to discuss final arguments. Also, the press is sniffing around about the new lawsuit. They might ask for a comment. Let me know if you want to do a statement. Press inquiries were part of her routine. Normally, she or her firm's communications director would handle them. This time, though, a flicker of an idea formed. Could the press be leveraged to highlight her airport ordeal? She didn't love mixing personal experiences with active cases. She preferred a measured approach. Yet she understood how personal anecdotes could galvanize public opinion. She typed back, "We'll be in DCBY noon. Let's meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow." Press draft a short statement about the broader issues of bias in law enforcement. Keep it general, but reference the reality that discrimination can happen to anyone. We'll see if we want to tie in my airport incident later, SC. Then she saved her draft motion and leaned back in her seat. The flight attendants did the safety demonstration. The plane taxied to the runway, and soon they were airborne. Clouds drifted by the window as Atlanta shrank beneath them. The flight went smoothly, and soon the capital skyline peeked into view. They touched down at Reagan National Airport around noon. Serena stepped off the plane, her mind juggling two major threads: the lawsuit she was preparing and the TSA incident that still gnawed at her. By the time she grabbed her luggage from the overhead bin and walked toward the terminal exit, she felt her phone vibrate. Checking it, she saw a message from Supervisor Klein. Quite unexpected. "Miss Carter, I've spoken with Officer Randall regarding your complaint. He maintains his actions were within protocol. However, there have been other concerns raised by colleagues about his judgment. We're reviewing the footage. I can't share details yet, but I wanted you to know we're taking this seriously. Regards, Supervisor Klein." That was more than Serena had anticipated. She texted back, "Thank you for the update. I appreciate your follow-through." Outside the terminal, a crisp Washington breeze rustled the trees. Serena hailed a taxi to her office in a stately building downtown. During the ride, she couldn't help playing out the possible outcomes of her complaint. Often, such inquiries ended with a bland statement, "We found no wrongdoing," but the fact that Klein had mentioned prior concerns about Randall's judgment intrigued her. Maybe there was more to this officer's story, some pattern of misconduct the TSA wanted to keep under wraps. The next day, Serena sat in her law office. A tasteful space lined with wooden bookshelves, stuffed with legal tomes and case files. A wide window behind her desk overlooked the steady pulse of the capital city. Jeff, her paralegal, perched on the other side of her desk, laptop open. They were reviewing final arguments for the racially biased hiring lawsuit. Jeff tapped the keyboard, scrolling through the dense legal language. So for section the 4th, we outline historical precedent, including Brown v. Board of Education and subsequent employment discrimination cases, right? Serena nodded. Exactly. We need to show the continuity of systemic bias. Then we demonstrate how this pattern was replicated at the corporation we're suing. Jeff cast her a thoughtful look. Understood. Also, about the press statement, how do you want to reference your TSA incident? Because a journalist from the Washington Post reached out earlier about something else, but they might be interested in a human angle. Serena leaned back in her chair, fingers drumming the armrest. Let's craft a statement that's broad. We highlight the systemic issues, talk about my experiences traveling as a black woman, but I won't mention Officer Randall by name yet, or the formal complaint. We let the public see that even attorneys who fight discrimination can be victims of it." Jeff nodded, scribbling notes. "Got it. I'll draft something that ties it to the bigger narrative. Also, the cameras are coming for a press briefing at noon today in our conference room. Just local affiliates, but it's a chance to set the tone." Serena's heart pounded a bit. She was used to media coverage, but mixing her personal ordeal with a professional cause required a delicate touch. She didn't want to overshadow the clients she was representing. Yet she also knew that personal stories could spark broader discussions. She decided to keep it measured, mention it as an anecdote and not a vendetta. At noon, Serena stood at a small podium in her firm's conference room. A handful of reporters from local news stations and one from the Washington Post took seats, microphones and recorders at the ready. She began by outlining the central arguments of the lawsuit: alleged systematic exclusion of qualified black applicants at a major tech firm. Data showed that out of 500 new hires, only 3 had been black, none of whom were placed in leadership tracks. Over time, HR emails suggested a hidden bias in candidate evaluations. After presenting the case's key points, Serena decided to pivot. "Before I open for questions, I want to share a recent personal experience. Just yesterday, I was selected for extra screening at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. TSA is meant to ensure safety for all travelers. However, in my case, I was subjected to repeated invasive searches without any indication I posed a threat. Unfortunately, such arbitrary scrutiny often targets people of color at disproportionate rates." She paused, scanning the room. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled. "The experience underscores what we've been arguing in court. Systems created to serve everyone can become tools of discrimination when personal biases infiltrate them. If these biases remain unchallenged, they fester into normalized injustice." A reporter from Channel 5 raised her hand. "Miss Carter, do you plan to file a lawsuit against the TSA?" Serena kept her expression neutral. "I've lodged a formal complaint and am in communication with a TSA supervisor. My priority is to ensure accountability and highlight this pattern of behavior. I'm considering legal avenues, but at this time there's no official lawsuit." Another journalist asked, "Have you faced similar incidents before?" Serena offered a wry smile. "Let's just say it's not my first experience of being profiled, but this was the most blatant in recent memory." The press briefing concluded with a few more questions about the corporate discrimination case, which Serena answered thoroughly. Cameras lingered on her, capturing an image of a composed yet impassioned woman confronting injustice on multiple fronts. Later that afternoon, while Serena was buried in paperwork, her office phone rang. It was Supervisor Klein again. "Miss Carter, we've completed our initial review of yesterday's incident. We also received supporting statements from other travelers who observed your screening. I can't disclose everything, but suffice it to say that Officer Randall is now under internal investigation." Serena felt a pulse of vindication. She kept her tone professional. "Thank you for the update. May I ask if this is part of a broader pattern of complaints against him?" Klein hesitated, then chose her words carefully. "I can't share specifics, but you're not the first to raise concerns. I'd appreciate if you kept this confidential until the investigation concludes." Serena agreed. After the call ended, she reflected on the power of collective voices. The fact that others had also complained strengthened her position and hopefully increased the likelihood of real consequences for Randall if wrongdoing was established. A week passed. Serena was busy with depositions, motions, and briefing documents for multiple cases. The TSA incident still lingered in her mind, but she allowed the formal process to play out. The press coverage about her story had sparked a wave of social media chatter on racial profiling at airports. Then an unexpected email arrived. Subject: Urgent Officer Randall's wife from email protected to email protected. Miss Carter, my name is Lucy Randall, and I'm Officer Randall's wife. I know you lodged a complaint against my husband. I'm writing to ask for your understanding. He's been going through a mental health crisis since our son's accident. We're struggling, and he's been acting differently at work, overly cautious, sometimes paranoid. I'm not excusing any wrongdoing, but please, I beg you, if there's any way you can show leniency. Our family is at the brink. Sincerely, Lucy Randall. Serena read the email twice, her emotions torn. She was stunned to receive such a direct plea. She felt for the family accidents involving children could be devastating. But she also couldn't ignore the potential harm Randall had caused with his discriminatory behavior. Still, a small part of her softened. She knew the toll mental health struggles could take. She typed a cautious reply. Miss S. Randall, I'm sorry to hear about your family's challenges. My complaint addresses what I believe to be discriminatory treatment. The investigation is being conducted by the TSA, not me personally. I can't simply withdraw my complaint. It's their decision whether to discipline your husband or not. If he needs help, I hope he seeks it. Wishing you the best, Serena Carter. She pressed send and sighed. Life was complicated. She believed in accountability, but also empathy. Could Randall's personal struggles have fueled his hyper-vigilant or biased behavior? Possibly, but that didn't erase the harm done or the principle at stake. A few days later, news broke on social media that Officer Randall had been suspended pending a comprehensive review of complaints. A local Atlanta channel ran a story about TSA profiling. While Serena hadn't revealed Randall's name publicly, leaks from airport staff identified him. Suddenly, Randall found himself in a swirl of negative press, labeled the TSA agent with a bias problem. Serena kept her distance. She never condoned doxing or harassment, yet it seemed that a combination of public interest and internal frustration among TSA staff had turned the spotlight on him. One evening, while she was in her DC compartment reading over a new court filing, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered, and a shaky male voice came through. Miss Carter. This is Dan Randall. Serena froze. She took a moment before replying. Officer Randall? He sighed. Suspended Officer Randall, yes. Look, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. But my life has turned upside down. I've been painted as a racist bigot. My family's getting threats. Serena rubbed her temple. Mr. Randall, I'm sorry your family is facing threats. That's never acceptable. But you must see how your actions looked from my perspective and from others. Apparently, there was a pause. She could hear him breathing unevenly, as if fighting tears. I was just trying to do my job. My therapist says I've developed hyper-anxiety since my son's accident. I got it in my head that certain people might be threats. I guess I wasn't thinking straight. He sounded sincere, but Serena had faced manipulative tones before. She stayed guarded. I understand stress can affect judgment, but that doesn't excuse discriminatory behavior. His voice broke. I know. Look, I know you're within your rights to push for me to lose my job. I can't lose my health insurance. My son's therapy depends on it. Serena's heart clenched. She believed in accountability, but she also believed in rehabilitation and second chances, provided genuine remorse and change were on the table. She found herself in an ethical dilemma. Stand firm and let the system mete out punishment, or advocate for a chance at reform. Mr. Randall, she began carefully, What are you asking for? I'm asking you to speak at the internal review hearing. Let them know I'm willing to undergo anti-bias training, therapy, anything they require. Just please, don't let them throw me away completely. The hearing loomed. Serena had received an official invite from the TSA to testify about her experience. She understood that her testimony could heavily influence the decision on Randall's fate. Meanwhile, public conversations about racial profiling at airports were hitting a fever pitch. Kendra at the ACLU advised caution. "This is bigger than Randall," she said. "If he's a scapegoat, the TSA might sweep systematic issues under the rug. We need real reforms, not just punishing one officer and calling it a day." Serena nodded, pacing her office. "I agree. But if I intervene in the hearing, there's a chance to push for policy changes, mandatory anti-bias training, accountability structures, data transparency." Jeff chimed in, arms folded. "And if Randall is let off the hook too easily, it sends a message that profiling is no big deal." Serena exhaled. She felt the weight of multiple truths. She wanted justice for those who'd been profiled. She also felt empathy for a desperate father. Could these two paths converge? Perhaps if she insisted on reforms as part of any leniency shown to Randall. Finally, the day came. Serena entered a TSA administrative building in Atlanta, flanked by a few other attorneys. She passed through security again, ignoring the anxious twinge in her stomach. A short woman in a crisp black suit led her to a conference room where a panel of TSA officials sat behind a long table. Randall sat to one side, looking exhausted, a union representative at his elbow. Supervisor Klein was there too, greeting Serena with a polite nod. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming." Serena took a seat at a smaller table facing the panel. She could feel Randall's eyes on her, but she refused to look at him just yet. The lead official, a stern man with rimless glasses, spoke. "Miss Carter, we've reviewed your complaint, the video footage, and the statements of other travelers. Officer Randall maintains he was under heightened stress and followed procedure as he understood it. Would you like to share your perspective?" In a calm, measured voice, Serena recounted her experience. She spoke about the invasive second pat-down without probable cause, the humiliating feeling of being singled out, and her knowledge of how frequently these incidents happen to people of color. She concluded, "While I understand personal stress can impact judgment, we cannot allow that to justify discriminatory treatment. If Officer Randall remains with the TSA, there must be mandatory training and oversight, not just for him, but for all officers. I believe in second chances only when there's a commitment to real change. Otherwise, this is just window dressing." The panel members conferred quietly. Randall's union rep requested to speak, emphasizing his clean record until recent months, citing the son's accident, the mounting medical bills, the therapy Randall had begun. "He's not a hardened bigot," the rep said. "He's a father crumbling under pressure." At last, they asked Randall if he had anything to say. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. I never intended to disrespect you or any other passenger. I can't defend my actions. I can only promise to do better." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Serena's mind flashed to Lucy Randall's plea, the terrifying position of a family on the brink, and the principle she fought for: daily justice. Could those be balanced? She gathered her composure. "I'll respect the TSA's decision, but I strongly recommend a systemic overhaul, regular anti-bias training, clear guidelines, accountability measures, and mental health support for officers. This can't just be about one man's error. The system must change." 3 days later, Serena sat in her office, the late afternoon sun casting long rectangles of light across her desk. She was trying to concentrate on a deposition memo when her phone vibrated. The caller ID showed Supervisor Klein's name, and a knot tightened in Serena's stomach. This was the call she had been anticipating, where the TSA would announce its final decision on Officer Randall. She took a steadying breath and picked up. "Miss Carter, this is Supervisor Klein," came the clear but guarded voice on the other end of the line. The TSA review panel concluded its deliberations this morning. "I wanted to inform you of the outcome directly." Serena's heart thudded. She had spent the last few days oscillating between frustration and empathy. She remembered every moment of the hearing. Randall's reluctant apology, the panel's probing questions, and her own pointed insistence that any penalty must be accompanied by systemic reforms. She also recalled the union representative's adamant defense of Randall's record and personal struggles. Now, the verdict was finally in. The panel has decided that Officer Randall will be suspended without pay for 6 months, Klein said, her tone neutral. He must also attend ongoing counseling and comprehensive anti-bias training throughout his suspension. Once his suspension ends, there will be a year-long probationary period during which any further misconduct, especially related to discriminatory actions, will result in immediate termination. Serena exhaled, tension rolling off her shoulders. Though she had prepared herself for various outcomes, hearing it officially made everything more real. "I see," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And the broader policy changes we discussed." There was a brief pause before Klein continued. "Yes, the TSA has committed to a more extensive overhaul. Leadership issued a new directive requiring quarterly anti-bias training at major airports nationwide, with an emphasis on mental health resources for officers who experience trauma or stress. We'll be integrating these modules over the next 6 months. While it won't solve every issue overnight, it's a serious step forward." Serena bit her lip, considering the gravity of those changes. "Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate that the TSA is taking this seriously." She hung up and stared at her phone. A swirl of emotions flooded her, relief that something tangible had come from her complaint, lingering anger at the harm Randall's actions had caused, and a cautious hope that mandatory training might spare other travelers from the invasive scrutiny she had endured. It wasn't the perfect outcome. Some people would argue Randall should have been fired on the spot. Others would insist he deserved leniency from the outset. Yet this middle ground felt, at least to Serena, like a measured approach, especially with real policy changes attached. For the rest of the afternoon, Serena found it difficult to concentrate on her other work. She kept remembering the expression on Randall's face during the hearing, an odd mix of desperation, regret, and guarded defiance. Then she thought of Lucy Randall's email, pleading for mercy on behalf of their family. Serena had wrestled with that empathy, torn between wanting accountability and acknowledging the fragility of the Randalls' situation. Shortly after 6 p.m., as she was packing up to leave, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "Miss Carter, I just heard the panel's decision. I know it might not mean much, but I wanted to say thank you for being fair, even when I didn't deserve it. I'm going to take this time to get my head on straight. I promise I'll do better." Dan Randall. She stared at the message for a few moments, debating how to respond, if at all. Ultimately, she typed a short reply. "Use this chance wisely. I meant what I said. We need reform, and that starts with each person taking responsibility. I wish your family well. SC." The next morning brought an onslaught of media coverage after a leak about the TSA's new anti-bias initiatives. Headlines read, "TSA to enforce stricter training after civil rights attorney's complaint an officer in controversial airport profiling case receives suspension, reforms implemented." News reporters outside Hartsfield-Jackson Airport interviewed travelers, asking if they felt safer or more suspicious of TSA's motives. Many people applauded the shift, others lambasted the TSA for going easy on Randall. Within a day, Serena's inbox overflowed with messages, some from civil rights groups praising her persistence, others from disgruntled citizens who thought the punishment should have been harsher. A handful of emails even arrived from TSA officers across the country, voicing gratitude that mental health support was finally being prioritized. The variety of responses underscored just how polarizing this case had become. Amid the frenzy, Serena forced herself to step back and look at the bigger picture. No single officer was entirely responsible for the systemic issues at large airports. Bias could creep in from countless sources, training that fell short, personal prejudices, or the stress that officers carried from personal crises. Real improvement would require consistent follow-up, transparency in how the TSA enforced its new rules, and vigilance from both travelers and watchdog organizations. Before leaving the office for the weekend, she forwarded the TSA's official announcement about quarterly anti-bias training to her friend Kendra at the ACLU. Then, she dropped her phone in her purse and gazed out the window at the Washington skyline. All her life, she had learned that meaningful change rarely came in dramatic sweeps. It often arrived in slow, incremental steps, each small victory laying the groundwork for the next. In this instance, Randall's discipline and the TSA's new directive were far from the endgame, but they represented a doorway opening, giving advocates like her room to push for even stronger reforms down the line. As she locked up and headed home, the emotions of the past several days washed over her. Relief, triumph, a hint of sadness. In her line of work, she'd come to accept that any real progress against institutional bias was bound to be messy, a tangled mix of pain, apology, confrontation, and, just maybe, redemption. If Randall could truly learn from this ordeal, it would be one more shard of hope that people and systems could indeed change. And if the TSA followed through on its promises, fewer passengers, especially people of color, would have to endure the indignities she'd faced. That night, she treated herself to a quiet dinner with a few close friends. They toasted to her small but significant victory, aware that many battles remained on the horizon. In the hush that followed the clink of glasses, Serena felt a cautious optimism take root. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would be ready to meet them, fueled by the knowledge that persistence and courage could yield real, life-altering results for those who so often traveled in fear of injustice. News outlets covered the TSA's decision. Serena did a few interviews emphasizing that the real win was the policy change. She fielded calls from civil rights groups thanking her for pushing the issue, as well as from travelers sharing their own experiences of airport profiling. Meanwhile, Randall remained largely out of the spotlight. Serena received one more email from Lucy Randall, simply saying, "Thank you for giving my husband a chance to change." Over the following months, Serena noticed an uptick in stories about airports initiating staff training, inviting diversity consultants, and creating clearer guidelines for secondary screenings. It was too early to claim victory over racial profiling, but it was a start, a real step forward in a fight that often felt Sisyphean. And so, life moved on. Serena continued tackling major civil rights cases, standing up for marginalized communities. Each time she stepped into an airport now, she did so with a heightened sense of watchfulness, but also with the knowledge that her voice had made a dent in a seemingly immovable system. The next time she flew out of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, months later, she passed through security with only the usual scanning. No extra pat-downs, no suspicious stares. For her, it was just another journey. For countless others, it was hopefully the beginning of something better, fair treatment and dignity in a place that once symbolized the very opposite. And so, the tumultuous story of Serena Carter and Officer Randall drew to a close, yet the impact of their collision rippled far beyond a single airport checkpoint. What began as a tense standoff at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport evolved into a catalyst for deeper reflection and tangible change. The TSA introduced mandatory anti-bias training. Randall faced accountability while receiving a chance for reform, and travelers gained a bit more hope that the system could, indeed, bend toward fairness. But this story is more than a single victory or a moment of redemption. It's a reminder that we all possess the power to stand up against discrimination. Now, I invite you to share in that power. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps build a community committed to justice, empathy, and meaningful change.